Aside from the obvious benefit of saving some hard-earned money, the hassle of fishing with your own product is almost incalculable. Most tackle shops have realized that eventually most surfers will want to make their own steel and line, so they have stocked their shelves accordingly. They now have a huge range of clips, lures, beads, flashes, floats and tubes. So many that it sometimes looks more like a shop than a tackle shop. It is that candy that not only makes a difference to your wallet but also makes a difference to your catch rate if used correctly. The first rule to remember is that there is no hard and fast rule for making rigs and lines. Like many things in life, some like them long and some like them short. Find out what works for you and adjust what you see here accordingly. I give you the measurements for each rig, you just need to know the diagram is the length according to the size. I like 600mm, because I think anyone would be happy with a 600mm. The rest of the measurements are related to that. Determine the ease. Cast the line down the beach and set the normal power. Now, set the stopper claim on the beach and go down the gap. Next, draw and quickly follow it. Please watch your claim pull down to avoid having a fish and feel the drag through the line. This is what any fish will feel. That being said, many good fish have been caught with the running rig, so now I will show you how I set my line. Remember, I use 60 pounds Black Magic supple mono for my traces. First, the catch is tied to the damper leader, then the damper leader is tied to another match. Your line, like in a running rig, is clipped to the second joint. I also clip my sinker line to the sinker. This way I can also make quick changes. Being able to change things quickly can make all the difference in the story when maximum immersion time means more success.
I think it's important for the public to know that fisheries are not a wide open West type fisheries. Specific numbers generated by the Pacific. Wild BC salmon comes from local pristine water. It also supports the small community.
This rig could go by another name, but I call it the 90-mile rig, as that is where I first saw it used. Trace length, as I said before, I like my line to be around 600mm long. This length allows for a lot of movement in the water, but is still easy to control when casting. The best part is that it gets tangled up. The biggest benefit when I am on a hot fishing session, I can dump the line and fish out and leave them on the beach while I attach a new line. Then I can get a new target before dealing with the questionable casts lying on the beach. To do this, I have half the targets prepped and ready to go. I can soak them in fish oil while I wait for them to be used, a real bonus. Better yet, I now leave them in secret sauce, and boy, does it work. How to make your own surf steel. A few years ago, I was fishing at Ocean Beach, just south of Napier. I hooked a guy who was new to the surf and still not convinced by the clip system. All was quiet, until a school of 2 to 3 kilo snapper moved in. Then things got pretty brutal, to say the least. I could only handle one line at a time, as there were only a few seconds to wait for a buzz when a new hook hit the water. But since I was able to respond quickly, when my partner had to start a new attack, my total response in that control session was 7 fish compared to his 2. Using attractors. Another way to dramatically increase your catch rate is to add bright or silver-colored attractors to your trail. If you follow that guide, you will be surprised at what is available and especially what it will produce when we hook a king salmon. Your drag line should be tight enough to get the line through a very stiff function.
Not only are we obligated
Sometimes, you may want to pull the drag line out after the initial hook. Why pull the drag line out? Because we want the salmon. A large king salmon cannot stretch much, making it possible to make a fishing line, a velvet fashion line, or even a rainbow on your rod, depending on what type you are using. But let's say you don't reduce the drag power. A king salmon can usually pull line in any drag setting you use unless you have an extremely sturdy reel, which may not be suitable for river fishing. It may be tempting to pull a salmon up just before entering the net, but the pull-up instruction should only be done at the right time of pulling the net, along with the thumb pulling the spool. Too early, and the fish will thrash on the surface, making it difficult for the fisherman to determine where the salmon is in the water. Another important aspect of salmon fishing is not to pull a salmon into shallow water to net it. If you are going to pull your fish into shallow water, you can either land the fish yourself or tag the tail yourself. Losing a salmon in the net rarely, never, happens. This guide will provide a path to clarifying when or never losing a fish in the net. Know the signs of a bad net. Know the signs of a bad net. We've all had that bad experience with someone, usually a friend, trying to follow our nice big recovery group and in the process either missing the fish or worse, dropping the fish off our club. We may even have been that person. There are a few things a group fisherman should keep in mind to ensure they're doing their job right, but first, let's go over some recovery fishing concepts since these topics overlap. Table of contents: the 3 phases of fighting trout in a group. Trout grouping techniques that will help group fishers. Some additional recovery trout grouping techniques. Fishing for recovery without the need for a wrap. The 3 phases of fighting trout in a group. When we first hook a trout, it will often fight back fiercely. The power and speed of trout are some of the reasons they are such popular fishing targets. Each trout species will fight differently. A king salmon will sprint 100 yards. A coho salmon will take to the air and be friendly around the line. Sockeye trout are easy to catch early on and then go into a frenzy as soon as they are out of reach.
Easier fit in the back.
Never try to fish in Phase 1. You may wonder if that is really an option, but it is not uncommon for a trout to come straight to your location with the illusion of a net strike. But if you make that strike, you will most likely miss the fish and potentially tackle the fish or make a net strike on your gear. I call Phase 2 when the trout appear to have lost a lot of energy and are either in net range or out of net range. However, trout still have many runs longer than 10 yards. A large salmon in Stage 2 can still club your line and will rip it again as soon as you fight it into the net. Stage 3 is when the salmon really gets tired. Usually, stage 3 is easy to spot because the fish will be flat or upside down in the water. However, it often takes a long time for a king salmon to reach stage 3. There are also some problems waiting until stage 3 to catch salmon. Most salmon in the river have very sharp teeth. The longer you fight the salmon, the more likely you are to rub your line against its teeth and possibly break the teeth. In some areas, you cannot keep some salmon or trout alive. Fighting an exhausted trout that you are destined to have will result in a much higher pre-spawn mortality rate. Our future fishing opportunities depend on the reproduction and growth of wild salmon. Salmon fishing techniques. Salmon fishing. King salmon fishing. Let's talk about the techniques of the fisherman answering the questions. I also want to talk about salmon fishing systems because not all are suitable for use. My intention is to discuss simple and more complex rigs and lines and how they are made. I think that, because they have made a particular difference to the picture, the trawler primarily catches pink salmon. Under Alaska law, the boat must be less than 58 feet long. The fishing system involves positioning the salmon and surrounding the fish with a large net with a buoy line that holds the fish above the water and a strong wire at the bottom of the net to sink the chain vertically into the water. A smaller boat grabs a group of heads and pulls it around the school of fish and reconnects the group to the main trawler. The net line that runs through the bottom net up to the trawler is pulled taut from a hydraulic block, closing the bottom of the net, like a purse line, to hold the fish. As the net line and net are pulled up onto the boat, the circle shrinks and the fish are closer to the water. At this point, the fish are plucked from the water into the hold of the trawler, where they are cooled for transfer to a small boat that transports the fish to a processing facility. The trawler primarily catches sockeye and chum salmon. The trawler's net is typically 30 to 40 feet long. They catch fish by casting nets vertically into the water and perpendicular to the direction of fish movement as they move towards the shore towards the currents. Similar to the fortification, the net has a cannon line on top and a strong fiber line on the bottom. The bugs are designed to be large enough for the male fish, which are usually larger, to be caught while avoiding catching all the smaller females. The net is retrieved on board by hydraulics and the fish are manually removed from the net as they are brought aboard. Similar to the fortification, the fish are cooled for transfer to smaller boats and eventually transported to base camps. Fisheries scientists use a number of methods to collect data on migratory salmon populations. The most coveted data are adult population trends, but that type of information is expensive to collect and is therefore often missing. Scientists also collect data on juvenile salmon and steelhead, which is useful in determining population status. The following are the most commonly used methods for sampling salmon and steelhead. Adult salmon and steelhead are most easily counted at spillways that span entire streams. Adult migration is interrupted and fish are allowed to pass through certain points or become trapped and drift upstream. The latter method allows scales to be collected for age determination or fish to be marked for sampling and subsequent estimation of upstream populations through censuses or carcass counts. Spillways are labor-intensive and expensive to operate, and spillways provide population trends for adult fish in only a few rivers or time periods in northwestern California. Spillways are sometimes installed at hatcheries, such as the Noyo River Egg Station, to capture spawning fish and can also provide counts of adult salmon and steelhead. Spillways can also fail during periods of high flow, so even if money is allocated for spillway operations, flow conditions can still interfere. Dam-related fish ladders, such as the Van Arsdale Dam on the Eel River, have, however, provided long-term counts of adult salmon and steelhead. Chinook and coho salmon die after spawning, so their carcasses can be counted as population indicators. Dead fish are marked and subsequent counts record the number of previously marked fish seen. The ratio of marked to unmarked fish allows for statistical population estimates. Salmon and steelhead nests, known as redds, can be seen as depressions in the stream bottom and are counted to help estimate population size. Redd surveys can be difficult or impossible due to high turbidity during periods of high flow when watershed conditions are disturbed. If a significant portion of adult salmon or steelhead can be captured and tagged or clipped, subsequent catches in sport fisheries can sometimes be used to estimate the number of adults returning to the watershed. This sampling regime also allows for the assessment of angler catches. Downstream migratory fish traps. Downstream migratory fish traps are often operated in small streams where the entire population of juvenile salmon and steelhead can be captured for a period of time. Larger traps, such as rotary screw traps, operated on larger rivers capture only a fraction of migratory fish and must be calibrated to be effective if they are to be used to estimate downstream migratory fish populations. These traps help determine run times and sizes of juvenile salmon and steelhead, as well as relative abundance, if not population size. Biologists typically count and measure fish, record species, and weigh a portion of the fish caught. Data from downstream migratory fish traps provide a more complete picture of fish community structure than in situ sampling such as electrofishing. Direct observation by diving. Fisheries scientists often use masks and snorkels to identify fish underwater and count juveniles or adults during low-flow conditions in the summer. Adult spring Chinook salmon and summer steelhead are counted using this method. Hankin and Reeves, 1988, presented a technique for quantifying juvenile salmon combined with habitat classification that allows for basin-wide estimates of juvenile populations. This type of survey requires electrofishing sections and basin-wide sampling. NMFS has funded surveys of juvenile coho salmon presence and absence in northwestern California streams using direct observation, Adams et al., 1996 and Brown et al., 1999. Pools are sampled, and sampling of a stream is stopped when coho salmon are found or 10 pools are observed. Electrofishing samples. Juvenile salmon can be stunned with an electric current, followed by netting. If a net is constructed and passes through the blocked area are made over time, population estimates for index sections can be calculated. These numbers can be converted into estimates of fish per unit area or volume so that standing seasons within a particular range can be compared over many years. However, this does not provide information that can be extrapolated to assess population trends across the basin. Shorter-term capture electrofishing samples are often collected as part of habitat classification. These samples show which juvenile fish are present or absent, thus